All right, everyone, I've got 12:05 on my end, and I don't see any more people hopping on, so we'll go ahead and get started. First, thank you so much for joining us today. In case you didn't know, we are partners of Scott County Watersheds. This is our May monthly forum titled Iowa Landowner Options. And just before we get started, I want everyone to know that this presentation is being recorded and it will be uploaded to our YouTube page in about a week or so. So if you want to come back and watch it, you can check there. We also ask that if you have questions throughout the presentation, that you please enter them into the Q&A chat box, and then we'll answer those at the end. So without further ado, just a quick overview. Partners of Scott County Watersheds is a nonprofit organization. If you're not familiar with us, we are dedicated to providing educational opportunities, technical guidance, and volunteer opportunities regarding water quality to the citizens of Scott County. And so one of the ways that we do that is through our monthly forums here. So we do have, let's see, there we go. We do have some more opportunities coming up. So our next forum will be in 1 month. That's with Dave Murcia, the director of Scott County Conservation. And he'll be talking about water stewardship, during recreation activities. And then we have our summer snapshots coming up soon. That's a big water quality monitoring event that we always need volunteers for. Finally, thank you to our partners. We can't offer our forums and other opportunities without them, so we appreciate them. And if you're looking to help us out too, there are lots of different ways. You can check that out on our website to learn more if you're interested. The last thing that I'll push here with partners is that thanks to Iowa Corn, we have a bunch of free nitrogen test strips that we're able to offer to anybody who is interested, as well as some technical assistance in using them and kind of figuring out what some of the data means. So if you're interested, send us an email or check out our website to learn some more. So without anything more, I'm going to go ahead and pass it off to the main act, to Carole here.
Hello, thank you, Kelsey. Let's see, I'm going to share my screen here. Maybe. Okay, it worked earlier. There we go. And I'll put it into, I need to move my little. All right, nope, that's not what I wanted from the beginning. There we go. All right, so hello everyone. Thank you for being here today. Thank you for being interested in this topic. My name is Carole Teator, and I am the Eastern Iowa Program Director for Iowa Natural Heritage Foundation. I'm based in Cedar Rapids. I'll have a slide that shows you the area that I generally focus on in Iowa. But first, I'm going to start with a little bit of information about Iowa Natural Heritage Foundation. And then I'll talk to you about a couple of stories of some land protection steps that landowners took to protect their land. And finally, I'll go into a few, I would say I'm going to give some very high level information about land protection tools. And of course, I invite questions, or probably even better, if you wanted to contact me, we could talk if you have specific questions about land that you are that you own or that you're interested in. My email address is here on this slide, but I will also have at the end of the presentation my phone number. So you're welcome to email me or to give me a call. All right, so Iowa Natural Heritage Foundation, we are a nonprofit organization. We're an accredited land trust. There are, I think, roughly, I don't know, a third of the land trusts in the country are accredited, and we are working on our renewal this year, accreditation renewal. So this is something that ensures that we follow the standards and practices of set forth by the Land Trust Alliance, which is an international organization that manages land trusts, not manages, but oversees activities of land trust. We have 27 staff, and then we are joined each year by about 15 to 20 interns who work across the state. And we have about 6,000 members. As of just a few months ago, we built on our regional presence. We have a staff, as I said, of about 27, most of whom are in the Des Moines office. And I am here in Lynn County. These are in orange. You can see the counties that I generally work in. Beginning of March, we hired a land stewardship director who's based out of Iowa City. We have two and a half positions, three people who work up out of Decorah in the Bluffland. We call this our Blufflands region. And then we have a new land stewardship director out in the Loess Hills. So our mission is to protect and restore Iowa's land, water, and wildlife. We do this by building partnerships and educating Iowans on ways that they can protect, preserve, and enhance Iowa's natural resources for future generations. And that's probably the most important thing. We do the work we do to benefit the future generations who follow us. We were started in 1979, and this organization was largely the brainchild of Governor Robert Ray and our first president, who's there to his left, Jerry Schnepp. But Governor Robert Ray recognized that there was a need to bring together business and community leaders as well as private citizens, I should say, to create a nonpartisan means of uniting all of these sectors for the purpose of protecting Iowa's valuable natural resources. Since our founding and continuing today, INHF has served as an intermediary, acquiring land from willing landowners and on the behalf of a public agency. We hold the land until that public agency has the funding together to acquire it from us. That's kind of at the core of what we do, but we also work on other land protection methods with landowners on land that may or may not eventually go into public ownership. So far we have protected 183,000 acres, and for comparison, as I have on the slide, all of our state parks in our state park system come to just under 57,000 acres. So many of the 183,000 acres we've protected are either part of the state park system or the county conservation board system, or in a few cases, they are city parks and public spaces. And trails, of course, fall into that as well. We have had projects in 96 counties, and we have worked with landowners to protect 205 acres. We have created 205 acre conservation easements. Really, I just got back last night from vacation, and you might be able to tell that my brain is still not quite into it. I'll talk a bit about what conservation easements are, but as part of that, we've protected almost 25,000 acres, and we own 7,500 acres across the state that are either in natural areas or are working lands that are owned and managed by INHF. But enough about us, INHF. The reason we're here today is I want to tell you a bit about land protection tools that are available to landowners. For the purpose of this presentation, I'm going to expect that most of you who are here today are landowners. Some of you may be natural resource professionals who work with landowners. And either way, I think the information may be helpful to both of those audience types. But I'm going to assume in these slides that you are landowners. I'm going to talk a bit about who protects land and why they protect it, how landowners can protect land, the benefits of that, and what help is available. I'm going to talk quite a bit about, in a few minutes at least, I'm going to talk a bit about real estate law and taxes and kind of some dry information. But I thought before we do that, it would be nice to start with a couple of real life stories. And the first story I want to start with is the story of Helen Reichardt. Helen made the decision in the late 1980s to protect her family's legacy here in Eastern Iowa. Helen was a Monticello native in Jones County. Monticello is in Jones County. She was the granddaughter of Jones County pioneers, Matthew and Honora Breen. Matthew and Honora were Irish immigrants who purchased back in the 1850s 140 acres of land, or at least that's as much as we know that they purchased. They might have had other land, but this was the farm that came down to their descendants. The original Matthew and Honora, the original landowners, they farmed this farm for several years. And when they passed away, the land was inherited by Helen's mother and Helen's aunt. And it was eventually passed down to Helen and her brother. When her brother died and did not have heirs, and Helen had no heirs of her own, she approached INHF to discuss the possibility of donating the farm to Iowa Natural Heritage Foundation for the purpose of long-term protection. So at that time, in the late 80s, the land had been in Helen's family for more than 130 years. At the time of the donation, the farm included approximately 90 acres of crops and 50 acres of either woodland or remnant prairie. It is located on both sides of Highway 38. As you go out of Monticello on Highway 38, it's about 3 miles north of the town line. From the beginning, Breen Prairie Farm, as it's officially known, was intended to showcase the ways that modern farming can coexist with native prairie. That was important to Helen, and it continues to be important to INHF. Helen encouraged us to continue farming the land and to use the income from the crops to manage the farm and to support our mission. She also supported the restoration of the remnant prairie, which we do through seed harvest. If you're ever interested in doing some volunteer work up in Monticello, especially in the beautiful fall time of the year, we do seed harvest. We use that seed on the farm itself to continue to restore that prairie. It's a really interesting prairie on some dry, rocky land. So it's sometimes we'll see species that we don't normally see elsewhere. But what I think personally is really exciting about this is that the plants that we see at Breen Prairie Farm are the descendants of the same plants that Helen's grandparents would have seen when they farmed the land in the 1850s. And in that way, they're connections to the past. And thanks to the farm practices and the care the family put into the land and the generous gift of land that Helen made, they give us seeds that connect us to the future. So Helen made the donation in 1989, and she passed away in 2011. This means that for about 22 years, she was able to see her gift in action and to know that her family's legacy would live on. So another story is that of Richard Zeiss. This is a little bit different. Helen's, the protection that Helen employed was an outright donation of land. Richard has protected his land in a slightly different way called a reserve life estate. And I'll talk about that a little bit more in a few minutes. But to tell you a little bit about the land that Richard has protected, the 110 acres in Benton County between Waterloo and Cedar Rapids. It's one of the highest spots in Benton County. Historically, it was covered with trees and was known historically as Spencer's Grove. Rich has invested a lot of time into restoring the prairie and caring for the woodland. He originally bequeathed the land. In other words, he put the land in his will to come to INHF with the expectation that INHF would permanently protect it. 15 years after he did that, he decided, why wait? And he decided to protect the property with INHF with a reserve life estate. And I'll talk about what that means a little bit more here in a few minutes. In the meantime, though, he continues to enjoy the land and to care for the land as if he owns it. And he has the peace of mind to know that should anything happen to him, in the meantime, INHF will carry on his stewardship and the land will be permanently protected, because it will transfer to us upon his death. The INHF expects to own this land long-term once it is transferred to us. If we ever were to transfer it to another owner, and we always talk about this with landowners because none of us can see into the future, and we are a very healthy organization right now, but we think in terms of 50 years, 100 years, we have a different sense of time than others might have. And so we always talk with the landowners. If we were ever in need of transferring the land, what they would prefer that we do. And so Richard has told us that, obviously we're always going to honor the donor's intentions, but he is comfortable with us transferring it as long as we place a conservation easement on the property. And again, I'll talk more about conservation easements, but specifically for his land, he has told us that he would want us to prohibit row crop agriculture and confinement livestock operations. And he would ask us to keep the woodlands and the prairies intact with management that's motivated by the wildlife habitat and not commercial value of those parts of the land. So for example, we wouldn't be managing the woodland for the purpose of logging it someday. We would be managing it for the purpose of wildlife habitat. During his life estate, so during his lifetime, management and property tax and insurance responsibilities are riches. And that is one of the features of reserve life estate. Again, it continues for all intents and purposes as if he owns the land, but technically he did deed the property to INHF, and that will be fully transferred to us upon his passing. Once under INHF management, we will control for noxious weeds, we'll manage any CRP still active on the property, and we'll of course maintain the wildlife habitats. So those were two stories with two reasons that landowners had for protecting their land, but there are many reasons. There are many impetuses that people have for protecting their land, and this word cloud shows you some of those that people have told us. As you can see, legacy is a very important one. Peace of mind, their grandchildren, wildlife, all those reasons that you see on your screen. So specifically, the land protection might be done for financial purposes. When people sell their land, especially for parks or such, they might need funds, or they might donate for the tax benefits, and we'll talk about some of those tax benefits yet today too. They may have no obvious heirs, such as Helen, who I spoke of earlier. They may not have people who will take care of, who they know will take care of it. Either their children are not interested in managing it, or they don't have anyone else to pass it on to that they feel that they can fully invest the trust in. They have ties to the land, such as Helen did. They're invested in the land, such as Rich is, with all the work he's done. It may be their family land, and they see it as an inheritance and a legacy. So who can help? Public land agencies such as the DNR, the conservation boards, the Natural Resource Conservation Service, U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, they can all help landowners who are interested in protecting their land. And of course, land trusts such as Iowa Natural Heritage Foundation. There are other land trusts in Iowa, such as the Conservancy or Borough Land Trust. And there are a few others around the state as well. Where do you start? You can certainly call INHF, and I hope you would. We can be your first call for help. We can assist you with some of the options available to you, and we can introduce you to various professionals who might be able to help you with your specific needs and motivations that you are bringing to this. And we're always, of course, free and confidential. And so it could be a place to start, and then we can go from there with you. We do have free resources. On the left of your screen is a photo of a booklet that I'm more than happy to mail to anyone who has an interest in reading a hard copy. I like to read hard copy sometime rather than online. But we also do have a website. Our website is inhf.org. And on that website, you will see at the top of the page a tab that is Iowa Land Options, as you can see the arrow pointing to there. If you click on that tab, it would take you to another screen. And on that screen, you will find the information that is in the booklet as well. So all of these tabs on the right here, if you click on them, they'll provide additional information specific to those topics that are identified there. So who donates land typically? Well, people with land ethic, people who care about the natural system, who care about wildlife, who care about the legacy that their land conveys to the future. You know, people who have family roots that are deep in the land, or people who perhaps purchased a property so that they can restore a woodland or restore a prairie or protect a remnant prairie. They might have, as I said, a family connection that may go back, you know, generations, or maybe something that is land that they shared with their children to plant trees on weekends, or to conduct seed harvests in the fall together. And it can be people with any income level. This is not something that is only done by the very wealthy, or you know, people who have land that they've inherited from their family. It can be just about anyone who has some land that they wish to protect. Typically, it's we are contacted when it's nearing time to sell or transfer the land, and particularly when people are doing their estate planning and they're thinking about what's going to happen to the land after they are no longer here. But it could, as I said, it could be anybody, it could be any time. And so what land in particular that we're concerned about are particularly land that may be along rivers or have streams running through them, might be good wildlife habitat or natural areas, prairies and woodlands adjacent to public land, or provide water quality benefits. But it's, as you know, with anything, it's hard to categorize. Those are very broad terms, and essentially, if you have land that you're interested in protecting, contact us and we'll talk with you about what some possibilities are. We also protect agricultural land, and often landowners who come to us are concerned because the value of the land makes the transition to others, especially those obviously in their family, difficult. It may be that the land is important to the landowner. They feel it's threatened by, for example, development of cities are getting closer and closer to their farm, and they're concerned that farm's not going to be available for farming in the future. They've invested a lot in the stewardship of the land, and they want to see that continue, and they have that family connection, and they want to see that family connection continue on the land as well. So principles to keep in mind as we talk about, there are many methods. I talked about earlier that we were started more than 40 years ago to be an intermediary to acquire land on behalf of public agencies. And typically that land is sold at fair market value. And then I gave you the example of Helen Reichardt, who made a full donation of the land. There are many that's a big spectrum, and there are many ways in between those two extremes. And when we talk about protected land, it's not just public land. And we'll talk a bit here in a few minutes about conservation easements. And typically, land that is protected with a conservation easement stays in private ownership. So protected does not mean just public land. And land and needs and landowner needs vary, and so it really could be different from person to person. And as this says, different strokes for different folks. And you know, there could be a mixture of land protection tools that landowners make available to themselves. So now to get into the purpose of this rural forum, which is to give a high-level overview of land protection tools available to landowners. I'm going to spend most of my time talking about the tools employed by Helen and Richard, who I talked about earlier. There are various methods and benefits of donating land for the purpose of permanent protection. I will cover some of these more than others, but there are two things they all have in common. They all can be used to permanently protect land to benefit those who follow us, and they can provide tax benefits as well. We won't spend a lot of time on the first method that you see listed here, because it's a method not very dissimilar to the sale of land at fair market value. In a bargain sale, a landowner sells the property at a value less than the fair market value. And they might do that. I mean, they may do it because they would love to actually donate the land outright, but they can't afford to do that. So their happy medium for them is to donate it at something less than the fair market value. But there's also the benefit of, there are tax benefits involved if you do sell at a bargain sale. That landowner would be eligible for tax benefits based on the value of the portion donated. Most typically, this is done when land is intended to go to become public land. That's when somebody would do that. Again, they want to see their land become available to the public. Perhaps they can't afford it. And so the donated value, say the property is worth $200,000, they sell it for $150,000. Their gift is about $50,000 based on the difference between the two, 200,000 minus the 150,000. But we're going to spend most of the next few minutes talking about bequests, donations, reserved life estates, and conservation easements. And again, all of these, what they have in common is that there are tax benefits possible for the donated value of the land. So donation tools, there might be an outright donation of fee title, and that's what Helen Reichardt did, the story earlier. This is a very simple way. It has the largest tax benefits because your gift is the largest it can be. It's the full value of the land. It also has the benefit of being done. Once you do it, you know that that land will be protected. There's no worry of it lingering on for years to come, and that might be a little bit easier understood when you think about a bequest. A bequest is a donation that you make of the land that you include in your will. It also is pretty simple. There are no tax benefits because it happens after your passing. It's a good safety net. Sometimes people put the land donation in their will because they know if something happens before they can figure out a different way that they want to donate the land, at least they know it's going to be used for donation purposes. I have to underscore, if you're a landowner and this is something that you're considering, it's very, very important that you talk to the conservation organization or the nonprofit that you are considering donating the land to. They will want to know that you're considering that, and then they one reason is they can talk with you about what your vision is for the land. And if it's something that they have questions about, or um, if they're not sure that they would be able to accept it, that would be something that they would be able to tell you upfront, and it will be left to be figured out after your passing. So the most important thing I would encourage you to keep in mind is it's really about that relationship that you can establish now with the organization, so that you really have the confidence as a landowner that the land you care about will continue in the way that you're hoping it will continue beyond your lifetime. And then reserving a lifetime use, such as what I talked about, the reserved life estate, is really a middle ground between an outright donation of the land and a bequest after a person's passing. So in a bequest, you designate land or assets in your will. It's revocable. You can change your mind between when you establish the will and your passing. Many landowners start with a bequest, like I said earlier, because they're not sure if they want to, or if they can donate land in their lifetime. So they put it there for safekeeping, just in case something were to happen to them earlier than they expect it might happen. Often it will lead, though, to a reserved life estate, that's the RLE, a donation or a conservation easement. Not always, but sometimes landowners, when they have time to consider more what they want the land to become after their passing, they work on these other methods that they can do earlier while they're still able to see the gift live on. So a reserved life estate, as I said, is a middle ground between a donation and a bequest. It's a donation of land in which you, as the landowner, reserve the right to continue to use it during your lifetime. It is irrevocable, though. Once a land is donated, subject to a reserved life estate, you cannot change your mind later. You donate your land for conservation, and you continue to use all or part of your property. You might decide to donate some of it and then reserve life use on part of it. And you can do that for a certain number of years, or you can reserve the use of it during the rest of your lifetime. You continue to live on the land, or enjoy the land, enjoy its beauty, and farm the crop ground if there is crop ground, and you would receive the income from that crop ground. You can name a spouse and or other immediate family member as a life tenant. So in other words, they can enjoy the continued use even after you pass on. However, extending this right to additional people, especially if they are significantly younger than you, decreases some of your potential income tax benefits. And I should say, when we talk about tax benefits, when I talk about tax benefits, I'm talking about income tax benefits, not property tax benefits. And if you have questions about that, we could talk about that, but that's an important distinction to note. So if you donate land and subject to a reserved life estate, you maintain those responsibilities of ownership, such as building maintenance, land management, insurance, and property taxes. You continue to pay those property taxes. You can't make management decisions that would significantly reduce the value of the gift, and this is particularly true if you claim those tax benefits. So once you have the value that you would use to claim those tax benefits, you cannot significantly diminish that. So for example, you can't log the land or stop maintaining the buildings unless you and the entity you're donating the land subject to life use, if you've agreed to that ahead of time, that's a different story, and that would affect the value of the gift for tax purposes. But generally speaking, you are not permitted to make any of those management decisions that would change the value of the gift. So this is basically what, so the advantages is that it's as if you continue to own the land. Some people who have worked with us to donate land and they withhold the right to use the land, they have asked us to keep it very quiet because they don't want their neighbors to know. And to their neighbors, some counties may have this in their land records, but many counties don't. So for all, those around, it seems like the landowner is continuing to own the land. It gives you certainty. As a landowner, you know that the conservation entity that you've chosen as the future owner of the land has accepted your donation, and it's a done deal. It provides tax benefits. Those tax benefits are certainly greater than those of request of a land, though it's not as large as a donation, a full donation without life estate use or a lifetime use. You would have flexibility to, for example, you might, have income and you would still be able to receive that income during your lifetime and any other life tenants who you have named. You have financial effects. You still continue to pay the property taxes and you have the maintenance costs, but then you can also claim tax benefits during your lifetime, which is, again, unlike a bequest. And again, it is irrevocable. Once you make this decision, you do not have the ability to change your mind later. You can, if you decide to set up a reserved life estate, to donate land subject to a reserved life estate, and you're assuming at the beginning that it will be for the rest of your lifetime, and then you decide 10 years later that you would rather just make an outright donation at that time, when you make that donation, you are also eligible for other tax benefits because essentially you're giving up the rest of the value of that land earlier than what the original gift was calculated as. So there again, there's some flexibility there. So this is a little bit more complicated of a tool, and I certainly invite you to contact me or talk with a financial advisor about this if this is something that you think may be something that you want to explore some more. And then finally, our final tool that we'll talk about today is the conservation easement. Unlike the others we've covered so far, where those properties typically are conveyed to a government agency or a conservation organization, such as INHF. Land that is protected with a conservation easement typically remains in private ownership. We do hold conservation easements on publicly owned land, and certainly if land is donated to us and the landowner has told us that they are comfortable with us transferring it to a private landowner or to a government agency, we will place conservation easement on that land, and if it goes to a government agency, they are subject to the terms of that conservation easement just as anyone else would be. With a conservation easement, with this method, typically a landowner either voluntarily sells or donates certain rights to the land that they possess as landowners for the purpose of conserving the land. So I have this image of the bundle of sticks analogy. As a landowner, if you think about all the rights that you own as a landowner when you own property, so you have the right to farm, develop it depending on where the land is located and the local laws. You may have the right to mine, depending on local laws again. You have the right to graze it, to sell it, to log it, all those rights that you have. When you place a conservation easement on a piece of property, essentially what you're doing is you're pulling some of those rights out of that bundle. and those rights are identified by you and the conservation organization that you're working with. You tell them what rights you want to hand over or sell, and what rights you want to retain. And that becomes attached to the land and continues in perpetuity. So we'll go a little bit deeper into this, but I guess it's important that you hear that word perpetuity, because the decision a landowner makes when they place a conservation easement on a property, it does continue forever, or as long as our current form of government lasts, at least. So in a conservation easement, you spell out the protection in a permanent agreement with a conservation organization. You continue to own the land, and you can sell it or pass it to your heirs with that protection in place. And one of the things you gain when you do that is you gain a watchdog, or one landowner who we worked with said that in her particular case, she wanted INHF to be her eyes into the future. She wanted us to watch out for that land into the future. When a conservation easement is placed on a property, one of the requirements of that is that there are yearly, at least yearly, monitoring visits that are made that ensures that anything that is not supposed to be happening on that property is not happening, and is an opportunity to answer questions both of the landowner who placed the conservation easement on the property, but anyone else who may be subsequent property owners of that property. So this can be very helpful in succession planning. Placing a conservation easement on some land may reduce value for inheritance. You continue to enjoy and own the land, and you have tax benefits. Those conservation easements are tailor-made. They're drafted to your interest and needs. There's a collaboration between the land trust, in this case, INHF staff, and the landowner. And the document will state the purpose as well as the prohibited and permitted uses. So some permitted uses might be you retain the right to hunt, fish, or otherwise recreate on the property, or any of those practices there that you see on the left-hand side of your screen. Some typical prohibited uses may be destruction of natural areas or building outside of a designated area. And then always no dumping will be allowed, no billboards, no mineral extraction. And again, there's so many different rights that you own as a property owner, and we would go through those with you of what you are allowed to do and what future owners will be allowed to do and what will be prohibited. So really quickly, when we're talking about easement value for a conservation easement, the way that's determined is you take the value of the property before any protections are placed on it. So for really simple math purposes, say a property is worth $100,000. After you place restrictions on it, that value, you would have to have another appraisal done and say the value is reduced to $65,000. So whereas before you could have sold it for $100,000, now it probably would sell for more like $65,000. So the difference between the two, or $35,000 in this example, would be the donated value, the value of the gift that you can claim your tax benefits on. So let's talk about the tax benefits. In Iowa, you can, as a landowner who has protected property for conservation purposes, you can get a tax credit for up $50,000 of the land, or 50%, wow, 50% of the land donation value up to $100,000. And you can carry that forward up to 20 years. You also have a federal deduction benefit. For easements, you can deduct 50% of your annual gross income. And if you're a farmer, you can deduct up to 100%. You can carry that forward for 15 years, and you would have to deduct the tax credit that you've received. For other land gifts, you can deduct 30% of your adjusted gross income. That can be carried forward for, if this is other than a conservation easement, you can carry that forward for 5 years. And then again, you would have to deduct any of state tax credit that you receive. It's important that the donation is ultimately made for public benefit. So to claim those tax benefits, it would have to be for public benefit. So we would have to define the conservation goals and the benefits to the public. And again, it can be for public benefit without the land becoming public land. So that's the example of the conservation easement we talked about earlier. We always encourage you to get a team of advisors, an attorney, tax advisor, perhaps a trust officer. We do not provide professional tax or legal advice. We can help your attorney or your tax advisor if they're not familiar with these tools. We can certainly talk with them and give them more information. And we definitely encourage you to hire professional advice as you're considering this, and consider a combination of options. Again, you know, you might put land in a request, and then work through some of the other opportunities that you have available to you as a landowner, based on the financial benefits you want to see, or life circumstances for your particular situation. And you are certainly welcome, and I encourage you to give me a call. My number is there on the screen. I would be happy to come visit with you, come walk the land with you, to have that first conversation. Again, it's always private and confidential. And you know, we could be a starting place and help you move on to some other partners if that's something that works for you, or we'd be happy to work with you throughout your journey of land protection. So I really sped up there at the end because I wanted to get to this part, the questions part. We have about, looks like 9 minutes left, and I'd be happy to answer any questions if anyone has any. And I'll put my contact information back on the slide while we do that. I see one question. What if an owner has a unexpected need for money, say for long-term care? Would the owner have a right to sell the land? That's a good question. You can sell the land if you are if you have a willing buyer. I mean, obviously, if you are looking at this as if the question comes from a land donation, if you have protected land through a reserve life estate, or certainly if you've donated the land, you're not able to sell it if you have the need for finances. If it's protected through a conservation easement, you do have the right to sell it. I'm not sure I'm answering that question specifically. There are some considerations to keep in place if a landowner, for example, puts into place or donates a property with the reserved life estate, and then say has to go into a nursing home or residential facility such as that. There may be some reach back considerations there, and I think I'm trying to remember. It's either 3 to 5 years. But if people have specific questions about that, we could certainly talk about that some more. Okay, and then I think there's a question there for Kelsey. So are there other questions that people might have who are here for the land protection? You're on mute, Kelsey.
My bad. I don't see any more coming in here, but give folks a minute or two more in case we have any. Oh, I see actually one coming in right now. What do you mean by reach back protections?
Yeah, so there are this is where it's a little bit outside of my direct area of expertise, but there are laws in place that say it basically protects, I'm trying to find the right word. If you are anticipating that you might have to go into, say, a care facility, and for lack of a better term, maybe you don't want to spend as much as it sometimes takes for that care facility. There are laws in place that make sure that you're not placing your assets in other hands in order to avoid the cost of that facility. So they can look back at some donations or transfer of assets that you made up to 5 years in the past, and claim that those assets could be used for your ongoing care or other needs. And I probably stated that in a much more crass way than a lawyer or a IRS official would state it, but that's generally the explanation of that. It's called look back, I guess, as much as it's reach back. So they can look back at what you have done in the past 5 years as when it comes to transferring your assets.
Awesome. Well, we'll see if there's any last minute questions. But as we go, is it really or clawback?
Clawback, thank you. See, I should have
Michael.
seen. Yes.
Interesting names for these. Awesome. Okay, well, looks like we're right about to the end of our presentation here. So thank you again, Carole. Thank you everyone for participating today. Hope you all learned something, whether you're a landowner or natural resource professional or just here to learn something new. I know I certainly did. We'll leave it open here just for a few more minutes in case you have any last minute questions. But thank you all again, and I hope to see you at our next forum.